What's going on, guys? It's Red Bull Tanker, and welcome back to Axis and Allies 1951 Europe, Turn 8. Alright, it is now September 1951. Going over to our random events. This one went for the Allies. The Allies received number 8, Allied Emergency Mobilization. The U.S. got an extra 30 IPC for their income this turn, and NATO got an extra 20 added on to their starting IPC this turn. Initiative. Well, kind of like what I said in the last video, it ended up going the Soviets' way, so the initiative went the Soviets, the US, then NATO. Funny enough, did the initiative roll, and it was the Soviets rolled a 2, and then the US and NATO both rolled 1s. And so then I just rolled again for NATO and the US, and it ended up being the US rolled a 2, and then NATO rolled a 1. So very low numbers this time around. Alright, for the Soviets, their purchases this turn were... they had 102 to spend. They bought 2 fighters in Kiev. They bought 2 airborne in Smolensk. They bought 3 tanks in Warsaw. 3 mech infantry here in Romania. And then 3 infantry here in Istanbul. Oh no, 3 mechanized infantry here in Istanbul. Combat. Alright, so because they got the initiative, the Soviets mustered up all their forces and launched a vicious assault against the U.S. 7th Army that was here in Hungary. They brought in all the surrounding area, all the units in the surrounding area, along with most of the air forces in the surrounding area. The battle went 2 rounds. The U.S. had 3 AAA defending the territory. On round 1, they shot down 2 Soviet fighters, and on round 2, they missed. Overall casualties, the U.S. lost the 2 mech infantry from the 34th/47th Infantry Division, 3 artillery, and then the 6 tanks, 3 of which were attached to the 3rd Armored Division, and 3 which were attached to the 6th Armored Division, and then the 3 AAA. The Soviets came out lucky with this battle. The Soviets only lost 2 infantry and an artillery. The 7th Army was quite surprised at the fact that the Soviets were able to mount a massive counteroffensive at the present time. Next, 2 infantry from this the 2 infantry that was in the Sudetenland with the 2 fighters that were in West Poland came down and attacked the 2 U.S. armor that were in Austria. The battle went 2 rounds, and at the end of it, the 2 U.S. tanks were destroyed, and 1 Soviet infantry was destroyed. And then finally, I think I forgot to mention this in the last turn, but during the purchases of the last turn, the Soviets did purchase an atomic bomb. And this turn, they used it. They used their atomic bomb on the Army of the Rhine that was massed here in Munich after it wiped out the Soviet army down there. There was no AAA, so the bomber got in clean. Damage ended up being 2 NATO infantry, and then the air base in Munich was fully damaged. That airbase is constantly being hit. But I mean, the engineers are keeping it alive. Non-combats. The Soviets railed these 6 infantry from Moscow to protect the Sudetenland. They also railed, I can't remember where. Oh, Kiev. They railed an infantry from Kiev up to Stettin to help bolster up the defenses there. They consolidated their air force here in Romania, West Poland, and Warsaw. And they moved some tanks to Istanbul from that were over here in cars that came out of the Middle East. And yeah, that was it. So then for the Soviets, they ended up collecting 95 IPC. All right, the United States. So initially, the United States started off with 61 IPC, but with that plus 30 of emergency mobilization money, they were brought up to 91 IPC. And so the U.S. did some major purchases this turn. I'll actually scroll in a little bit. All right, so first off, the U.S. bought 4 infantry and split those up. 2 of them are flagged under the 104th Infantry Division. The other 2 are flagged under the 91st, or is that 97th? 97th Infantry Division. Oops. They bought 2 mech infantry flagged under the 30th Infantry Division. And then bought 4 tanks, once again splitting them up. 2 of them being flagged under the 10th Armored Division, and the other being flagged as the 11th Armored Division. Whoops. And then the U.S. also bought 2 fighters as well. And then they saved 5 IPC at the end. Or then they saved 5 IPC. Alright. Combat. First, the U.S. armor and mech infantry that were here in Marseille jumped on the 4 transports, went down here and did an amphibious assault into Cairo. So those 2 divisions were, the mech were flagged as the 83rd Infantry Division, and the armor was flagged as the 4th Armored Division. There were 2 cruisers and a battleship in the Mediterranean providing support fire. On the offshore bombardment, they only got 1 hit. They hit a Soviet infantry. And then during the combat, there was also a Soviet artillery that was lost. And the U.S. suffered no casualties. And now the U.S. control Cairo, which I already have a note for next turn that I'm going to do some changing around. Add something extra if the Soviets get to the Arab League, which will be automatically adding a factory into Cairo, so the Soviets can play a little bit more down here instead of just it kind of stalling out right there. All right, next, the U.S. sent, with their 2 B-29 bombers, the U.S. did attempt 2 strategic bombing raids. The first one was on the factory here at Greece. Unfortunately, the AAA gunners were on the mark, and they shot down the B-29 over Greece. The other B-29 went into Istanbul. The AAA missed, and the bomber was able to score 9 damage. I'm probably going to, probably for the next game, I'm probably going to take out the whole fact that you can actually destroy factories, air bases, and naval bases. I'm probably going to take that out because it's kind of getting confusing to remember what it is, but I'm still going to try and play it out for the rest of this turn. Non-combat. Let's see here. The U.S. continues to with the loss of their major army force. The U.S. has moved troops into more infantry into northern Italy, or they railed the 89th Division out of Reims and railed it here to Turin. A new division was flagged under the 1st Infantry Division of the infantry that were already there. Meanwhile, from the build queue, a fighter came to Turin, and then in Marseille, the 31st Infantry Division landed along with the 2nd Armored Division. And then the U.S. moved their B-47 to Paris, and then brought their air transports from Paris back to the build queue. And then at the end of the turn, the U.S. collected 59 IPC plus the 5 that they saved, so then they got 64 IPC. NATO. Okay, NATO initially had 77 IPC, then they got the 20 IPC boost from the random event, which brought them up to 97. NATO bought two mech and a tank in Rome. They bought, up here in London, they bought 2 infantry, a self-propelled gun, a tank, and a transport. And then in Paris, they did their standard build of 2 mech, 2 SPA, 2 self-propelled guns, and 2 armor. And then saved 2 IPC. NATO did not conduct any combat this turn, just kind of with how bad it, with kind of how bleak the situation for NATO is. Well, for NATO and the U.S. right now, going into the fall of 1951. NATO decided that it was probably best to suspend operations, especially give it the turn, so that way the nuclear effects on Munich can be undone. And then let's see here what else. They consolidated most of their fleet here at the opening of the Denmark Straits. They moved that destroyer and transport from Sea Zone 14 up into the channel. They moved their 1 infantry from Rome up here into Turin to give the American infantry some backup. They're consolidating a lot of their forces too here in West Germany. They brought the 2 fighters in from Belgium. This turn, NATO pretty much spent the entire time just kind of rebuilding their strength and not really trying to push out and try and gain ground against the Soviets. All right, and then at the end of the turn, the NATO collected 77 IPC plus the 2 they saved, bringing them to 79. Well, that, like I said, that was quite the turn, and we'll just kind of have to see how the game keeps going. I stand by what I said last video, that, I mean, had the Allies been able to beat the Soviets wholesale in the initiative, the Allies probably could have won the war this turn. But, man, with the Soviets winning the initiative, they were able to kind of they were once again able to delay the clock. Really, for the Soviets to win, they just have to they pretty much have to just either outlast the Allies till outlast the Allies until July 1952, or hope that when we get to the bottom half of the map, or bottom half of the calendar here, February to July 1952, they'll get lucky and the random event ending the war will get them there. Or at least hopefully they're in a position that the war will, like, if this random event is rolled, the war just ends in a draw. No one actually wins. Everyone will just go back to the status quo antebellum. Original borders will be in place. Whereas if the Allies will win if they liberate all of Germany, all of Poland, and most of the Balkan and Baltic areas, basically restoring Europe back to the pre-1939 borders before the Soviets annexed all of this. Whereas for the Soviets to win, they just have to hold. Like, even if the Allies get as far as only liberating Germany, that's not enough for them to win. The Allies have to basically restore all of Eastern Europe by July 1952. If not, they lose. But again, if that random event is rolled, then the war just ends in a draw, and everyone goes back to the pre-war borders. But, alright, that is going to be it for turn 8, and we will see you guys next time for turn 9. So until then, guys, as always, take care.